Hello.
Hello.
Marco, I'm not sure I've met you before.
No, it's my first time. Nice to meet you.
You too. I introduced myself, but we usually do a few introductions when we start, so we'll wait till then.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I don't think we've met, Marco. How's it going?
No. Hello. Hi, I'm Marco. I'm new. I'm good. That's it.
Perfect.
Cool.
We'll hold off just a little bit and have you do introductions in a bit.
Sure.
Typically is how we kick it off, but
That's
we'll
what
get
I
thought.
literally just
Yeah.
said the same thing.
perfect. Well, you ran away, and well, yeah. Sorry.
I needed a coffee refill. It was
Just setting the
unfortunate
stage.
timing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw we've had a big boost in people registering interest
Okay.
for their project. So I think we have like almost 130, 140 people interested in this meeting alone.
Okay.
I don't think we'll get to that point.
No, I would anticipate actually maybe a little bit light today.
I
we'll
hope
see.
not. If we have 100 people in this Zoom meeting, that could be problematic. I mean, as much as I'm glad for enthusiasm.
Yeah, we'd have to make PowerPoints and stuff.
No. If it gets to anything like that, we just switch to a oh wow, I can't even speak anymore. A webinar format, and where we have the main speakers, and when someone wants to speak, they raise their hand and we let them in. That's kind of how everyone else has been doing it after a certain number of people.
Yeah, a couple of the other meetings that I've been to with like the other, SIGs and stuff like are way smaller than these, which I was kind of surprised, but I'm sure there's some that are large, but like the app delivery one was pretty small. The meeting I went to at least.
Yeah,
I can give it a minute or two. We do not have a scribe for today, so I don't know if we have any volunteers.
I can do it again because I don't think I'm saying that much today, so I can do it.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah, and apologies, I only moved and added the additional, let's say, date in the notes quite late on, but everything should be there. So I'm just sharing the docs.
Perfect. All right. Just give it a minute or two more. Since Pete had a topic, I put his topic first. So if he's not here, we can just skip it.
Which is interesting because I'm here because of Pete. So.
Yeah. Well, I suppose we can probably just kick it off if you want to do a quick introduction, and then maybe Pete will join. If not, we'll move his topic down a little bit further and circle back if he ends up joining. Cool. So Marco, if you don't mind giving a quick introduction.
Sure. So hi everyone, my name is Marco. I used to work with Pete at ThoughtWorks many months ago, and that's why I'm here. He shared about this little meeting in a private Slack with ex-colleagues a few weeks ago. So that's why I'm here. Feature flagging is something I've been looking and using for a few years. In fact, with Pete, we've been discussing ideas for a few years now. So I'm curious to see what you come up with and if I can help eventually.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, welcome. Nice to meet you.
Thank you.
Cool. So yeah, I guess the next topic was roles for the next meeting. So if there's any volunteers for scribes, that would be great. And if not, we'll pressure someone the morning of. So
Yeah, sadly,
no
next week,
takers yet. Okay. What's
next
up?
week I'll be in the open source summit in Texas. So,
Is that next week or in 2 weeks?
sorry, in 2 weeks. In 2 weeks,
Okay.
I'll be
yeah,
there. Yeah,
cool.
I meant for the next meeting. Sorry.
I'll also be there, so we should hook up.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, sounds good. Cool.
Cool. All right. Pete is not here, so we'll circle back to that unless, and I'm not exactly sure. You mentioned something about the CD Foundation and potentially, they said, would it be worth pursuing a membership? I don't know much about that, so we'll let him speak to it. If someone does know, we can talk about it quickly now.
I'm a board member of the CDF, so I can answer any questions that you might have, but
But is
I
it worth
think-
pursuing? I guess that's the general question. I don't really know, how it would fit potentially in there. I think there are some potential, integration points, but not sure what the benefits of like a membership would be or what that means to pursue. So if you
yeah,
don't mind
I'll have
talking
to,
about that
I'll
quickly.
have to look into it, I think.
Perfect. Yep.
There are a handful of like CI/CD tooling, like Jenkins X and things like that, that are projects in the CDF. And there's certainly, I'm trying to think about like what projects we already have, and it's a lot of like CI/CD tooling, and this is, I don't know, I'm not entirely clear on the, like whether, like our project is right now like headed towards CNCF, and what does it mean to be part of both, and does that make sense?
Mhm.
CNCF clearly makes sense in the Kubernetes operator flag D thing. So I don't know.
Okay.
We
Yeah. Let's I guess think about that. The one thing that I can mention regarding this at least is we submitted a paper for KubeCon US, and one of the topics was trying to integrate basically um, OpenFeature, Flag D, and Captain actually as part of like a pipeline. And part of the pitch was really like, doing production release or release testing effectively. So releasing a new feature behind a feature flag, kicking off automated tests that test that new feature, kind of quality gates in production, I guess, if you will. And that was going to be something that we try to demo. Of course, we don't know if the talk was accepted at this point, but that was, we thought a fairly interesting topic to discuss. So cool. I guess yeah, we can circle back if Pete joins. He can certainly try to elaborate on that, but I think it's something that we can just kind of consider. And I think Justin's probably the perfect person to kind of think about where that could make sense and if it makes sense at all. So perfect. Next one is the open telemetry semantic convention issue. If you don't mind, add a comment on there. It's one of those things where we really won't get it through unless we prove that there's, kind of broad industry support for this. If you take a look at the issue itself and it's confusing or you don't understand or you totally disagree, let me know. We can try to talk through it and see if we can, compromise effectively. I do think there's a lot of value here, but it's not mission critical we get it merged in. This is just basically adding convention to a span. So we can just do it ourselves if they don't merge it in. It doesn't really stop us, but I do think it adds a bit of awareness to feature flagging in the open telemetry world, which certainly benefits us. It's the second most popular project on the CNCF, so that's why it would be nice to get it in. And it's really just seems to be in kind of a pending state. I think they're just waiting for more people to kind of add their support to it. And I think I mentioned in the last call, just adding like the thumbs up emoji is useful, but they can't really tell what company or who you are. It could just be like a random bot or something adding a little emoji in there. So if you just add a little comment, that would be super helpful. And hopefully we can get that thing resolved quickly. Pete, welcome.
Hey,
We were
sorry I'm late.
no worries. We were just talking about your topic here, and it sounds like Justin is very involved in that project. So it might be something that we can kind of chat about, in the future and see like what makes the most sense. And I don't know, Justin, do you have anything to kind of elaborate on that?
No, I think the big question for me is like, is CNCF the right place to have like the feature flagging clients? Certainly the flag D stuff makes a ton of sense in CNCF. But like, does it make sense to have it in both? Does it make sense to like not split them up or dual membership? We would need to
You're
think
talking about
through
the
like,
CD foundation, right, though? Or because you mentioned the CNCF.
yeah, so I'm not clear on what it means to be for a single project to be a member of both. And like if we would want to split up client libraries and flag D implementation, which doesn't really seem like where we're headed, so I wouldn't push that way. So we just need to think through what that governance structure would mean to be part of both projects.
And you already have some contacts there that you could talk to about it to kind of explore that more?
I think
Yep.
Justin is the contact by the sounds of it to some extent. So
Yeah, I'm at the CD convention today, and I'm a board member of the CDF. So
Perfect. Yeah, the context is that I was chatting to Liz Fong Jones about OpenTelemetry, and she just kind of mentioned like, you know, it sounds like some of this stuff is more on the CD Foundation side, and exactly the thing that you were just saying, where like the flag D stuff is very clearly like CNCF territory, but the feature flagging stuff might be, you know, it might be more like not more of a fit, but like it might be right in that sweet spot for CD Foundation. And I think that there is, just from looking at their website, I think that there are some projects that are in both, like actually like the Kubernetes flagger something thing that isn't quite feature flagging is on both of their
well, I'll talk with some people today about it.
yeah.
interesting. Perfect. Okay. Sounds good. That might be another topic then for the next meeting then, Justin, if you could give a quick update on that. Cool. Next one is just kind of a general call for help, or if there's any volunteers for certain aspects. The first one that we're gonna have to start working on is documentation. So figuring out our strategy for that. You know, it seems like something like a Docusaurus or something seems to be the most popular, but how that could look, especially, you know, spanning multiple repos, and what our strategy is going to be for keeping this thing, you know, up to date and all making sense. I think once we start getting, you know, this thing in an alpha state, we have providers available. We'll have to have some kind of like onboarding docs. So, you know, there's a lot of work to be done in the documentation, or from a documentation standpoint, and it really hasn't been looked at too much. So if there's anyone that has any, you know, background in that or interest in that, any help would be, you know, greatly appreciated on that topic. Next one is the GitHub workflows. So I have a couple issues. You can see it in the notes. First one is just like a stale issue bot. It seems like that's just kind of a common thing to have. I don't know if anyone has any strong, you know, opinions on that. I know it can be kind of annoying if you open up an issue and after like 60 days it just kind of closes, but it may be a nice way to keep you know, some of the backlog relatively clean unless they're, you know, active issues. So there is an issue there. If someone has a, you know, a pro or a con for that approach, you know, let us know there. But it's something that's probably worth you know, trying to wire it up. And if someone feels like trying to wire it up, take a crack at it. I mean, we have it in the community repo issues right now. Same thing with the first bot, or the first interaction bot. I think that could be pretty valuable. Having done a few things in like, you know, OpenTelemetry recently, my first experience wasn't great. It was basically like, why are you doing this type of thing? And that was kind of annoying for when you spent time to, you know, open up a pull request. So if we could maybe make our first interaction bot slightly more friendly, at a minimum, just saying like, thanks for your contribution. Even if we end up, you know, not merging it in, I think it just shows that like, you know, we do appreciate the help here. So an issue associated with that as well, if anyone has any opinions or feels like just taking up that task, that would be great as well. The last two I do not have issues for yet, but it may be worth looking at some kind of you know, org label strategy, starting to see how labels can be used when they kind of get sucked up into the roadmap itself. And so just having some kind of general like label strategy could be really, really helpful. I started on it, but if anyone has any like strong opinions or, previous projects where they had some label strategy that worked really well, anything related to that would be super, super helpful. And then the last one is, it's probably in a similar thought, just issue templates. So if we could, find some common issues that are issue templates that we would like to support, just thinking about that as well, just so we can have some more consistency when it comes to, new feature requests and spec proposals and bugs and anything else like that. Just trying to get in front of that would be a helpful thing as well. I'll probably create just basically like placeholder issues in the community section for both of those topics, and we can, kind of chat about it and assign it from there. I have not done that yet though. So it's just more of an FYI. And if that's an area of interest for anyone, could certainly use some help on those. Cool. Next, just a quick update on the Playground repo. So Todd was able to get the Node.js SDK in a pretty good spot. It's nearly spec compliant, except for the part where we changed the spec a couple days ago. So sorry, Justin, I saw your comment too. But the plan is to get that all spec compliant as soon as possible and update the Playground. But the Playground is up to date. It's just technically not quite up to spec because of the changes. We also, as part of that, you can see the next topic was the contrib repo. So I've just started the process of that, the contrib repo, and it kind of subject to change how we want to name it and how that should work. But it's basically a place for providers to be stored, hooks to be stored, and those will likely have to be like closely related to the language that you're implementing. So the way I've named it so far was Node.js, dash SDK dash contribs. It's similar to what OTel does in terms of how they kind of decouple the two. And I'm hoping to have something for the Node SDK available shortly. Once I kind of figure out how we can manage this, I'll publish that. I'm doing it locally at the moment just to try to get all the flows working. But that will be probably a good test bed to see how we can, have different vendor providers, start to be added to this repo. Also different hooks, so working on like the OTel hook and maybe a logging hook and a few others, and then making those all available on NPM as well. So once those are available, it's much easier to start testing OpenFeature, at least for Node. And if we could figure out what strategy works best, we can start working on the Java equivalent and things like that, which then makes everything else a lot easier to start testing and playing around with OpenFeature itself. Todd, did you have something
It's
that looks
probably,
like
yeah, it's, pardon me. It's probably worth saying that providers need not, I'm sorry, I'm getting over something here. It's probably worth saying that providers need not define, be implemented in this contribs repo all the time. I think that likely vendors will want to write their own provider. I mean, we've already, I think, heard specifically that Split would be probably writing their own provider. So it's not like they would have to put their provider in the contribs repo. It's just where you would implement possibly some vendors, but also maybe vendor neutral providers or open source ones in general, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be part of it. We'll probably start with the Node one because it's just kind of easier to get started, and just figure out how that should be structured and look. Worst case, like I would say, if something like Split decides to put it in their separate location, we might be able to just throw like a README in there, and just say like under the providers, there's a Split one, and you can find the code in this other repo or something like that. So those are items that we're gonna have to kind of figure out. But we're going to try to start that over the next week or so. So start looking forward, I guess, to the contribs repo. And that brings me to the last topic on my agenda, was just general feedback on the roadmap. It's pretty basic right now. I certainly realize that, but like, is there areas that are totally missing that need some major improvements to it? What general structure? Like, if there's anyone that has any strong opinions either way, certainly appreciate the feedback.
I like the alpha roadmap. That's been really helpful for me. I think we need to add things to that which amount to the pieces that allow people to actually use the thing. Like it needs to be released to to a, like, I guess there's the spec and then there's the SDKs, but like we actually need like a proper release to the package management systems. We need documentation. We need like
Mhm. Yeah, so
so
maybe,
set up that I don't know we necessarily have and stuff like that.
right, yeah, so basically some kind of like road to alpha or something like that needs to almost be its own project board.
Yeah, we have an alpha milestone project board.
But I think the milestones only apply to like a specific repo, which makes it tricky.
Hmm.
Which I think it was only in like the spec repo. So I can take a look at it, but I mean, the bigger goal is because it spans so many repos, figuring out how we can be very clear on what it takes to get to an alpha state. So I'll see what's available. If anyone else has any ideas or experience or has worked on other projects that's done this really well and I can use that as a reference or something, let me know. But I'd like to make sure it's very clear, like what pieces need to be, worked on for, the alpha release. And also which are not actively being worked on. If anyone has the cycles to take a look at it, that would also be super helpful. Cool. That's it for me. Is there any questions or feedback on any of those topics? Cool. Looks like Todd, you're up next.
Yeah, okay, so I think my stuff will be pretty quick. So one thing that came up, we've talked about it a couple times, and I think I can't remember if it was at the Flag D SIG meeting. Alex kind of mentioned something about it too. I agree with the idea that we need some kind of cross-platform test suite or test spec. So we're generating from the spec, we're generating a JSON file that kind of specifically extracts all of the RFC 2119 keywords. I'm not sure if I'm getting that number right, but that kind of parses the spec and gives you a firm set of expected behaviors from an SDK. I think we need kind of a test suite, probably in some kind of JSON or YAML format that we could process by test harnesses in various language and then make assertions against. So Harness, this is going to be difficult because I'm now referring to Harness, the company. Harness has something similar for their SDKs. So I'm going to add an issue for this, maybe a few issues, because I think it's really something that we need to do to make sure all the SDKs are kind of behaving similarly, and coherent. Obviously, it's a decent amount of work. But that's the plan, and I think it's a good thing to have. So I'm going to open issue on that. If anybody has any comments or ideas, feel free to add something to this doc or say something now or comment on the issue. I'll create an issue and put one in this doc, and also ping the channel when I create it. Any comments?
The main question I would have is what would be the most appropriate repo to put those type of issues in? Because it's not like spec related, it may be like community or something, but
I don't think it's community. I think it is spec related. I mean, I think it could be something that we put in the spec, like just the expectations. I mean, we could kind of vote
that's
on
probably
it.
fair. Okay.
We could have it in a separate repo too. I mean, it's just going to be JSON or YAML. So
It does seem like it's part of
might
the
be
spec
good.
if you want it to evolve at the same time, right? Like if you
That's fair. Sure. It's just like a way to validate that your stuff is spec compliant, I think. So I guess that is appropriate. Yeah. Okay. I'm just trying to figure out, because that's sometimes the challenge, is figuring out what is the best place to put some of these like project related issues. And I've kind of gone back and forth between spec and community in some cases. And if you choose the wrong one, it doesn't get the same level of interaction, it seems. So, but I think in this case, I think you're right. Spec makes sense.
Todd, can I ask a question? Like, I'm trying to imagine what kind of stuff would be in those tests. Like, can you give me an example of like the type of thing it would be testing?
Yeah, so Harness literally implemented basically this for their SDKs, but it's not really tests. It's basically a set of kind of assertions in a well-structured format. So it gives some input, and it gives and then it gives an expected output. And so your job in writing a test harness in a given language is to kind of parse that input and then find a way to make sure that the output matches the expected output. So it's really not much other than like inputs and expected outputs. I hope that makes sense.
Seems like we'll also need like some sort of provider on the backside to make any output possible.
Yeah, like I mean, we could basically have like I mean, you could have a mock provider, so that could be part of it too. That's probably the easiest way. I mean, that's how I've been testing my SDKs. Is basically the Node SDK basically has a mock provider, right? And every test sometimes it grows, sometimes it returns this value or that value, right? So, I think that the goal would be to define some kind of schema for kind of describing, yeah, the inputs, the expected outputs, and maybe the state of the mock provider for a given test. I'm not sure. I haven't really thought too much in detail about it, but welcome to any, totally interested in any ideas or feedback or on that one.
So this
Yeah,
would
and
be a
just-
test for like the core itself, not for like a provider. It wouldn't be like testing that a provider is spec compliant. It would be testing that like the implementation of OpenFeature in language blah is spec compliant.
Yes,
Got it.
basically, yeah, basically not the providers, but the actual. I mean, maybe a similar thing for providers would be interesting.
Yeah.
But I think it's really about the core, like you're saying.
Okay, got it.
Okay, and flag D update. I mean, this one is going to be really quick, I think, but yeah, we've made a lot of interesting progress on flag D. There's still some decisions to be made and stuff up in the air about it, but I have, at least on my local Kubernetes cluster, a really interesting end-to-end demo working with flag D. Reading values, loading them dynamically, configuration, config map CRD, representing a feature flag that propagates through the cluster. So yeah, there's still like, we still got to kind of reach some coherency because there's kind of multiple architectures being proposed, and it may be that we have multiple architectures. I'm not sure. Yeah, so if you're interested in seeing how that stuff works, please attend next week, next Thursday, our subgroup meeting on flag D and some of the cloud native stuff. I don't know if Alex wants to add anything. I know he's been working a lot on that project too.
Yeah, I mean, just to say that I think it's pretty close. It's usable. It compiles across 7 architectures. It's pretty light. It has, as Todd was saying, a little way to go on the refinement of the evaluation engine integration, whether it's going to be done in a particular way, but I feel pretty good about it. Like, I think we're pretty much there for kind of an alpha version.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
one
think that's it for
interesting
me.
kind of added benefit of this too is it allows us to, kind of test a provider locally. So you could take Kubernetes out of the equation and just run this thing on your system, and then just like register like a flag D provider, and it would just work, which allows you to basically make changes to a JSON file and then test it locally and stuff. So like there's some pretty interesting opportunities for maybe end-to-end tests or for other places where this could really shine. So to be determined some of those pieces, but I think it does lead to some interesting opportunities in the future. Like was teased earlier, if you have interest, definitely join the meetings next week. And we'll try to upload the recordings of those as well. So if you don't have time, just go ahead and review that. And we'll provide a really quick update on these meetings as well, without trying to overload these meetings with 2 kind of distinct topics. Cool. Justin, it looks like you're up next.
On the Java SDK, the test suite has gotten out of date with the spec, and so I'm just like re-implementing all those annotations that I put in, along with some validation that things look right. Because I could not figure out the Gradle build issues, I'm doing this in a janky Python script with regexes. So we'll see how that goes. My hope is to have the Java SDK like production ready by end of July. I'm just traveling a lot this month, and so I'm not able to put a ton of focus on it, but I want to get it for use internally, for production use in end of July. So let's see, vendor roadmap. So we should probably be tracking like the vendors that are going to launch with this thing and whether or not they have backends for various languages. So if we're gonna launch presumably with Python, JavaScript, and Java, then we should have some form of tracking where we're like, cool, launch Darkly, here are your 3. Like, are you going to release these, and if so, when? Okay, split, like same thing. Some sort of dashboard and just like understanding of who's going to be writing what software.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I think the contribs repo that I'm gonna start, or have started already, but just haven't released it yet, should help in that. And hopefully we can get some commitment from the different vendors. And I guess answer your first question, like the languages that we're targeting right now, all of them, basically support these. If we start getting more obscure languages, we may run into problems, but the couple that we're talking about right now is pretty well supported. But figuring out if the vendor's willing to do it would be, yeah, I think something that we need to start as soon as possible and make sure that we can support them so we can hit, our release goals as well. Yeah, that's a good point. Thanks.
And then
Yeah, I think, go ahead,
Go ahead,
sorry.
sorry.
Justin.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think having commitment is really the important thing. That's a great point, Justin. I think that it would be a bit of a flop if we kind of, had like an official announcement or alpha release for various languages and like made a bit of a big deal about it, but there were no existing providers and there was no buy-in from vendors. That would feel like a bit of a flop. So I think that's an excellent point. We should get commitments and ideally have providers ready to go that are production ready, or at least like alpha beta production ready at the same time.
The last one is just an issue that's open around. So we allow the ability to add a structure to an evaluation context, and structures aren't necessarily serializable in like the Java sense of the word, or might have cyclical JSON objects or any number of other things. And so I think what that results in is us throwing exceptions when you add things to a context, which kind of sucks from an API perspective, but I don't know of another way around it.
I think we had an issue around this. I'm going to link it in the spec. You and I have talked a little bit about this. It is kind of, I see the issue that you're trying to bring up. I think they're in existing SDKs. They already behave like you kind of explained. So there's a few SDKs that support objects, and I don't mention any by name, but like I ran into the exact issue you're talking about. So I had an unserializable object that had a referential cycle in it, and when I threw that into the context, I just got an error and my value defaulted. So basically it did exactly what I kind of would expect the OpenFeature to do. So I don't know if that's encouraging for you to hear or what, but
so here's the part that's not clear to me. Why, like, it happening at evaluation time throwing an error versus it happening at context addition time. So in the Java side of the world, I think I have to throw exceptions when you add it to the context, not when you evaluate your flag, which means that you throw hard exceptions.
It's probably a better place to do it than the flag evaluation, it feels like to me. Like, I don't know.
You don't get the default value, so it's not it's like less safe from that perspective, although it is dramatically more clear what went wrong.
Right.
Interesting.
Yeah, I guess I get what you're saying. Like if you did it at flag evaluation time, then you could fail silent, or you could fail without an exception and return the default. Whereas if you're doing it,
is that where picking up like that logger topic may be useful or something? Like we could just, silently swallow, or not silently swallow, but swallow it and log or something like.
So what that would mean, so what that would mean is that we have a user who has tried to add an object to context and then run flag evaluation. and the result that they get did not take in that piece of context into account, which feels surprising and maybe dangerous, question mark?
And I think
So,
also
if we back up,
go ahead, Todd.
well, maybe I'm missing something because I've been spending a lot of time in Golang and JavaScript, and less in Java. But is there a reason why serialization needs to occur at the point that that something's added to the context? If serialization only happens during evaluation, is that a reasonable solution? Or I guess that's one part I'm a little bit confused about.
Mhm. And so I think in Java world, we would have to convert that to an object type then in the context itself and lose information about what type it is. If we
Or
didn't
you could
serialize
do-
it early.
I mean, you could do something really wacky, like try and serialize it and then like make a note that like this is terrible, like it's broken. And then like at the point that you evaluate, just like say like, oh yeah, this is a broken context. So I'm gonna just always return. Like I'm sure that I bet that there's ways to do it either way. I think the question is more like, what would we want the behavior to be? Would we want the person injecting the context to get fast feedback that they're breaking things versus sticking to the rule of not throwing exceptions, and with the trade-off being that like the potentially a different person on like a different team could be dealing with the issue. So like this person here is like accidentally shoving something that can't be serialized into the context, and then this person who sits in a different office somewhere is now like unable to evaluate in certain situations. It does seem pretty like my because of that, like I would lean towards like failing fast, and then I don't know, it feels like such a cop out, but like having like an option of like configuring it or something and saying like, if you really, really want to never throw an exception, then we'll do something about it. But that feels like a total cop out, like, and puts a lot of extra burden on implementing the SDK.
Yeah, it's just tricky because like I think if you fail a single time in production, and that's like whatever OpenFeature is viewed as the root cause of that,
Yeah.
like you have the potential of just getting like ripped out. Like coming from like an observability world, if like the agent breaks something, it's like, oh yeah,
Yeah,
we're
but-
ripping it like so.
But but like, and I think we've talked about this before, but like I think also think through the opposite, right? You put in something that should be stopping a feature from being evaluated or not, but you've messed something up, so now that context is broken, and now everything is returning a default value which hasn't been turned on for 2 years, and you get like a Knight Capital scenario and the company loses $1 million a second or whatever. Like that's like a total exaggeration, but
Yeah.
but it is definitely there are definitely a lot of feature flags out there that like if they went to the default value, it would be almost as bad a day as something failing fast. Like it would probably be at worse than something failing fast, and you getting pretty quick feedback of like as to why.
Yeah, I think the question is like whether would you fail fast? Like my concern is in a world where we have dynamically built context and you're taking like data from provider X and shoving it into your context, like that being malformed in some way, and the result being that at 3 a.m. now your thing starts throwing exceptions. Like if we could say like exceptions happen in development time, and once you get it right there, like production will be safe, then I feel really good about throwing exceptions. But I'm just not sure that that's likely.
I mean, it could be
Yeah.
an opt-in behavior or something like that if we wanted to.
There's
Again, back to the cop out.
a third path maybe is we say that we ignore that context. So rather than returning a default value, if you inject context that can't be serialized, then it's ignored and we log stuff, and that might be like a compromise. Because the thing that I really worry about is like reverting to a default value, I think is actually can be a really treacherous thing to do. So ignore, like if you inject kind of crappy context, then it's ignored. Feels like maybe it's like the least terrible like alternative.
Yeah, I think I'd be open to taking an action item to write down all of our terrible options.
Yeah.
In like one document so that we could be like, okay, well, we explicitly choose this bad option instead of those other bad options.
Yeah.
I think that's a good idea. Yeah. I think if it's documented behavior, it's probably fine because like it's a tough problem that probably has no perfect answer.
I think it is a really good call out though, that thing of like throwing an exception or anything that ends up being like, oh, it was OpenFeature's fault is a bad thing for just the adoption of feature flagging.
Yeah, and I get your point about the default path being potentially dangerous, but like that that would be a weird there's a lot of situations where default values could come back, I guess. So like I get it, but it's like, you know, like I don't think you'd probably want to say like default paths are like super dangerous. Otherwise you should be removing that feature flag. I know it's a bigger problem and sort of out of scope of OpenFeature itself, but like maybe that's part of like the education part of it. Is like if you get to that state, like it needs to be gone because you're setting yourself up for failure.
I
Returning
mean,
default is like the safest thing for OpenFeature as a project, to be like, you picked the default, that's not our fault. Right? Like you picked it. If it's not a safe value, then you should have not picked that one. And that,
I mean, it is a good point though. I mean, even this education, like calling out that the default should be safe, because you know, people are going to use feature flags for legal things, right? Like to Pete's point, like what's worse, a 500 or you've accidentally allowed access to something in your application that is not, maybe needed some legal hurdle cleared. Maybe it's like now you have a HIPAA violation or something like that. Like there's a lot of horrible things that could potentially happen in worst case scenarios. So part of it might be that the default should always be sane and safe, right? So, and I mean, even for the client side, something that's come up a lot lately is that a lot of vendor domains are blocked on the client, by block lists, by DNS black holes and stuff like that. So in that case, you're going to default.
Just to play devil's advocate, like there's typically an 80-20 rule, right? In most things in life, you'll find 80% of people like your opinion on how things should look, but there'll always be the vocal 20% who say, why the hell did you do this? So maybe building a modular composable system where we can actually augment the specification to certain companies and individuals' requirements might be something we think about as a long-term goal, because you can't make the assumption that one way of doing things is going to fit everyone.
Yeah, there might be some companies that just say like exceptions all day rather than like we never want to take a default value because we're
I mean, it could just be as simple as documentation too. Like if you wanted to fail fast, you could use like a string evaluation and the default value. If it returns the default, it throws there or something like that, you know? So there's potential opportunities there,
you know,
or a hook maybe.
This conversation, like what it makes me think of is what I would absolutely love is like a vendors council where we could just go to like every vendor and say, hey, you've probably had like 400 hours of conversations about this over the course of your company's history. What did you do? Partly because it's like tapping into all of that great wisdom and knowledge and like historical arguments, but also because they're the ones that eventually have to implement these specs. So if we come up with something that was like in our opinion is the right way to do it, but then it makes it harder for every vendor to implement, then that's kind of got ramifications too, right? So
yeah, I think that's a good idea, a great idea actually. Where should we put it? Because we could if we put it like a you know, or readme somewhere or markdown page somewhere, we could basically just ask and then they could say Launch Darkly's opinion is this or whatever. And it would be very clear, you know, what the different vendors think of different topics. So, or maybe Doug or someone else from, you know, Launch Darkly could, you know, let us know if you're actually interested in that.
I can.
Yeah, I think we'll take it and consider it. I'll flip this up to Dan. He wasn't able to join today, but I've got some notes going for him.
Okay, perfect. Thanks.
I could take like an action item to try and figure out that broader thing of like what's the like how can we kind of like draw on the knowledge of the the various vendors and kind of put together like a advisory council or something else, something like, even if it's just like literally just a list of email addresses where we can just email them and say, hey, we had this question, and kind of start a conversation going. It's worth a try. I don't know how well it would work, but it feels like it's worth an experiment.
You
Yeah,
could
no,
also
I think
go down the route of having it as almost like an advisory board, right? You get sort of 4 or 5 individuals, and we don't so much just give them a carte blanche of give us your laundry list of things that you think about, but more like here's a design that we're thinking of doing.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think one thing that Dan and I have been discussing is just a better understanding of what the rules of engagement are for vendors as it relates to this project. I think across things like public speaking opportunities, promotional opportunities, making some of these recommendations on the technical perspective, I think it would be helpful for us to have a good sense of what you all believe is best for the community. We can obviously, push as much as we want, but we want to make sure that we're doing it in a way that doesn't come off as being self-promotion-y or salesy or any of that type of stuff. So that's one thing Dan and I were actually just chatting about last week. And it might be a good way to think about this vendor council is this is the rules of engagement for the people that have commercial projects in the space.
Yeah. Okay. I'll follow up offline and maybe just get a conversation going with folks at various vendors and see if I can make any progress there.
perfect. Yeah, thanks, Pete.
And Doug, should I include you and Dan in that when I start talking about that? I assume I should.
Yeah, that would be great.
Great. Awesome.
All right, cool. It looks like that's it for agenda items. Is there anything else that we want to add?
One little follow-up thing on that the thing that Justin was saying about getting folks lined up for like a providers for the 1.0. We talked about having like 3 providers like Java, oh gosh, I can't remember, but those 3 languages. I think it might be more nuanced than that, because I think that there's going to be the client side, server side aspect, and I almost think that for some of the vendors there's like a platform specific aspect, like I can't remember, I think I was looking at the Launch Darkly, like the repo list, and it's more detailed than just like this is the JavaScript client side, it's like this is the React thing, this is the whatever thing. So I think we also need to just get clear on, be really specific on that.
I chatted with our mobile people internally and they said, yeah, we're definitely not going to use your Java SDK. We only use Kotlin that does non-blocking everything. And I was like, yeah, okay, that makes sense.
I mean, I think like the client side, server side split is like a very, very, is a pretty big split. I think I'll probably get proved wrong, but I would love it if we could figure out a way so that the SDK itself was not client side specific or server side specific. I think that's feasible, that you could have like, rather than it being the Node SDK, it could be like the JavaScript SDK with 2 different providers that plug in, like, split client side JavaScript provider and split server side client provider. And then on top of it, you would probably end up having like, React specific things that like sit on top of the SDK, or like
Extensions,
Express
probably,
specific. Yeah.
I agree. I suspect that's the case.
If we could get to that, it would be awesome, because I think that's the dream. That's like the dream in that kind of diagram I put in my blog post of like having just one implementation of like the core SDK, and then being able to do like client-side specific stuff and React specific stuff or whatever, without having to have like all of the stuff in the middle duplicated. So yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Part of definitely the focus has been server side, although I had talked to a few people about starting to investigate client side, and just kind of what the nuances are there. So hopefully we start seeing a little bit of action in that area as well. But just trying to stay relatively focused. So if that's, again, if that's an area of interest or expertise or something, and someone wants to start taking a look at it, that's something
Yeah.
that's, we're fairly weak in that area, I would say, at the moment.
I did start like some experiments with getting like just a really simple React JavaScript. I talked to Todd about it a little bit. I think like I ran into some issues where I think like the SDK wasn't quite like ready to be plugged in. But I think maybe it's at a slightly different spot now. So I might kind of take another run at that in my copious spare time and see if I can kind of plug it into something.
Yeah, Todd, do you have any follow up on? I think it probably is actually in a pretty good spot to start testing it out and see what we can use client side, what maybe doesn't work as well as we had hoped, and yeah, get some feedback
I
there.
haven't experimented with it, but I would kind of be surprised if it didn't work. I mean, there may be some like random compiler or TS, maybe not even, honestly. I would guess things would just work now.
Yeah,
just work. So
I think
that
the
might be
main
naively optimistic.
work
We'll see.
would be, yeah, I think the main work would be implementing would be building a provider for like a client side provider, because like I'd hoped that, probably pretty naively, I'd hoped that I could just take like the split provider or the launch darkly provider and just plug it in, but we've used the backend versions, the server side versions of the providers, and they don't work in client side because they're not supposed to. So yeah, a little bit of work there.
All right, cool. Looks like we have quite a few different action items then for next week. Yeah, and review the, I guess, call for help. If there's any areas that you find interesting, let me know. I'll definitely try to take a look at those on the roadmap and make sure that we have everything up to date. And again, if you feel like something's missing or should be a higher priority, either take it on yourself if you want, and that would be great, or try to promote it and see who else can potentially pick it up. Be super helpful. Our focus is really going to be trying to get, I think, the Java and the Node SDKs in a good spot, starting on the contribs portion, so we can start to really have the conversations about what we can do to build out providers and hooks, and then hopefully we can start actually like getting it in people's hands to start playing around with to get some feedback. Perfect. Okay. I guess that's it then. Any last thoughts?
Thanks, guys.
All right,
Thanks.
perfect. Sounds good. All right, talk to you later. Bye, everyone.
Bye.